are you using, Roosevelt to revive a degree of, national character and, courageous, purposeful, morally committed, throughout the world, that type of America? Would you say, TR rescued the American spirit from complacency and corruption? And, does it need rescuing now? Is this sort of an ode to Teddy, but a call to be more like Teddy?
Yeah, I don't go into it thinking about that, but every time I finish one of these projects, and by the way, I have a great team. I've got a researcher who plants herself in national archives and libraries and gets these nuggets of history, and then I've got a co-author, and we bounce back and forth and kind of put it all together like a quilt. But anyway, we go into these things looking just at a soda straw moment of history, and bounce back and show how that leader gets to that point. But every one of these books, and think about it, I've done Eisenhower, Reagan, FDR, Ulysses S. Grant. The last book was about George Washington and the Constitutional Convention, and now Teddy Roosevelt. Every single one of these books, as you get to the finish line, there is something that ties in with the current time. So, like the
Yeah.
beginning, the intro, and the epilogue, I try to do the very, very last when I have to turn in the book because it ties into exactly what's happening there at that time. This one, Teddy Roosevelt really wanted his legacy to be that America was going to lead the world and be a global leader. And so he reaches out to Russia and Japan. They are battling over territory, and it's becoming really bad. It could become a world war. And he says, I want to host a peace negotiation. And he gets the delegations to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he shuttles between the delegations and figures out how to get a peace settlement. And for that, he gets the Nobel Peace Prize. And it puts America on the map as far as trying to find solutions to world problems. At the same time, President Trump's doing that with India, Pakistan, and Congo, Rwanda, and Israel and Hamas, trying to do it with Russia, Ukraine, not with any success so far. But that is happening as this book is coming out, and it kind of ties in. Each one of these books has had that moment.
What has happened with Hamas? Is Hamas still in? It kind of gets knocked off the page. I mean, it's sort of like, but I don't think they've laid down arms. I don't think they've. It's not resolved. I said repeatedly, they're not going to do this, and I don't think they have. So is it just out of the news cycle?
Yeah, again, this goes to the point of the Epstein files and all these other stories. Like, that's a major story in the world. What Hamas is doing there, is this ceasefire going to hold? IDF has been going back in a couple of times to take out specific cells. Um, there hasn't been an Arab force, security force that they promised was going to come together. They're working on it. Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are over there trying to hold everything together. But they haven't laid down arms yet. And while they have handed over the hostages and almost all of the bodies of dead hostages, they haven't relinquished their arms. And that's a big, big deal in what happens in the Middle East.
I don't know if President Trump is a great student of history and presidential history, but you look at the themes of your book. Leadership through the strenuous life. Teddy Roosevelt grows up in New York as an aristocrat and takes off and heads west and loves the outdoors and proves he's a tough guy that can hang with the blue collar workers. Moral courage in public life, balancing strength and restraint, preservation, like protect what's worth keeping. He established 5 national parks, 150 national forests, protected 230 million acres of public land. You think Trump has ever been to a national park and gone hiking?
Oh, well, I'm not sure about the hiking, but he's been to a national park
Yeah, the
sometimes.
hiking for sure not. Imagine the hiking shorts.
I
I
know.
just can't see it.
If there's a golf course near the hiking trail, he may have played there. Listen, Teddy Roosevelt did some big things. You talk about a president that had executive power expansion. Think about this. From George Washington to William McKinley, the 25th president, collectively, all together, they signed 1,200 executive orders. Teddy Roosevelt signed 1,300 executive orders. as
Wow.
president over those 2 terms. Now, a lot of those are specific efforts of conservation and protecting those 230 million acres of land and doing other things, which he thought was going to be protecting for the future, and still is to this day. But he also did things for labor. He got involved in the first labor dispute as president. He solved the coal miners' strike in 1902. He files 40 antitrust lawsuits against big business. So he believed,
Yeah.
even though he grew up as an aristocrat, he believed in fighting for the little guy and was kind of a champion. So you couldn't put him in a box ideologically. He was both a conservative and a Republican, but also a progressive who had inclinations to fight for the little guy.
His last note, though, a sour note, right? I mean, he was the Ross Perot of 1912, right? He came in
He
and
really was.
he started the Bull Moose Party and split the vote, and elevated Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, to win. And so, how does that affect his legacy? Did he go on and, unlike Brit Hume told you, don't make it about yourself? Did he make it about himself and kind of end on a sour note there? Which is,
If I had to, if I had Teddy Roosevelt back and I was asking him one question, I would ask him about that choice. And I think he would regret it if I had to guess, because he really hated Woodrow Wilson and his policies, especially during World War One. But he does. He decides to run against Taft, who was his vice president. In between there, he leaves office after the presidency. He gives this speech called The Citizenship in the Republic. It becomes known as the Man in the Arena speech, which
yeah,
essentially says you got to get in the game. You can't be throwing rhetorical grenades from the sidelines. You got to do stuff, be a doer. And I think he's talking to himself because he wants to get back in the game. He gets back in the game as the Progressive Party candidate, the Bull Moose Party, and he campaigns around the country. He gets the most votes of any independent candidate, more than Ross Perot, and that hands the election to Woodrow Wilson, which has big consequences in the world. I think he would regret it. Republicans definitely look at that as a big, big fault.
yeah. Um, Brett, I have another question. Just going back a little about there's a big thing. I listen to Scott Galloway. Do you know Scott Galloway?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I try to move it around as far as the views that I take in. I find this guy to be very smart. He's got a book out, nothing to do with politics. Has to do with young like men. And
Yeah.
you're raising young men. You've got an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old, and he's worried that the boys aren't interacting with the girls. And in fact, he said 18 to 25-year-olds, 45% of them have never asked a girl out because they just send a text like "yo, hey," or a TikTok direct message or something like that. There's not. Do you talk to your boys about, guys, put the phones down and call her?
100%. And by the way, I've heard Galloway speak. It's he's really compelling, and I love the stuff that he says about going back to old school and teaching kids how to be kids, boys, girls, and interact. Those phones, I think, are in one sense they're forward leaning and the communication's great, blah blah blah. But in one sense, it's really, really bad for them, for their development. And they become introverted into TikTok or Instagram. I mean, I've just started being on TikTok at Bret Baier, Instagram. If I'm not on Instagram Reels or YouTube or TikTok, my younger kid, Daniel, does not know what I'm doing. And I posted something the other day, and he's like, "Dad, that's so cool." I'm like, "What do you mean? I've been doing that for a long time." And so I think we're at a different spot. And I do think that they got to put down the phone and they have to interact and really tell a story. I say no phones at the table when we're eating, and I want to hear a story. I want to hear a joke. I want to hear something that happened during the day. I want to hear like a narrative so that you can tell me something instead of like texting an emoji to tell me how you feel.
Have you ever told them the story of how you went on a blind date with Amy and somehow asked her out a second time, and you couldn't just text her and say, "Hey,
Hey,
what's up?
yeah,
What's
I
up,
did.
Amy?"
I told him you got to get active. You
Oh,
got to be in the game.
I remember.
His Galloway's whole thing is you got to go to a bar and actually hit on somebody if you're single instead of like scrolling off and swiping left.
Galloway's interesting. He's like these kids. They need to start drinking it. They're not drinking anymore. You're drinking is a rite of passage. You get a little bit of courage. You can ask the girl out. The whole thing is like, you're not drinking. You're losing your chutzpah.
Ear muscles, yeah.
Yeah, it's beer muscles.